All right, so we will do another key light for this rope that this guy is wearing. So key light's pretty good at getting something like that. So I'm going to go straight for key light because I know that that's going to be a pretty good one. So if I go and I break that off, I'm going to break this down same way we've been doing it. Put a key mix on there and let's plug it into a mask. Switch clip to none and set our properties to 1 so we don't get overwhelmed. And plug that in here. And then we'll just roto around that area. So we're going to treat that area differently. So I'm going to put a nice roto shape around it. And something like that. And it looks like I'm going to start with a default key light. It's actually one I copied. So let me just place that. And okay, so now what we're going to do is we'll just start playing with the numbers again. So we can set that to 1. We could invert and let's just try to get, we really want to get sort of a red tone in there. So we could do a Despill matte again, or we could, I'm going to start with an alpha bias. So that kind of helps get those specific tones. So if you just use these colors, usually it goes to, it seems like it kind of just goes to orange and stuff like that. But as soon as you incorporate this alpha bias and you select the thing you're trying to despill, it sort of gives you different, I don't know, blending of colors. So I'm basically just going to try to get red. But you see, if I just try to do a key light and I try to get red with just these numbers, it's sort of weird in the way it kind of, I guess, tries to get that. So you can get blue and you can get orange pretty easily. But if you're trying to get red, you know, you can't really increase this green amount. It's just the way it's sort of replacing the color. I'm not sure the math that's actually happening in there. But as soon as you incorporate either screen balance, it seems to give us that change of color there. So you can either use like the screen balance, or you can select the alpha bias, which we're not worrying about the alpha. Alpha doesn't matter, but it says it's using the Despill bias for the same thing. So it's kind of, if you just select it, it gives us that that color that we're trying to get. So let me just put this back. So obviously that's way too bright and like toxic almost. But if we play around with these numbers after we set the alpha bias, we can kind of play around with different colors. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, you could just do like a base despill with your key light. For example, doing something like this, and then doing something like this, where you get like the luminance back. And then you could make a Despill matte like we've done before, and then just do it that way. So there's a million ways to do it. Again, Despill madness. Despill madness. And plug it in. We could definitely play around with some of these as well. Playing with a fine tune, you could probably get something to get rid of that green edge at least. See, something like that. It sort of actually does a better job right off the bat if you just play around with sliding that. And then you could obviously go with the gamma and the offset and just like replace it with red. So we could do something like that. This is why the Despill mattes are really useful, because these color correction tools, it's not behaving the exact same way as like a normal grade, sort of. Like it's not the exact level of control that you might want. So Despill madness, you can just put Despill matte in alpha, and it actually gives you that automatically without even doing any like math or anything in terms of minusing stuff. So that's just to keep in mind. I think this is fine for what it is though, the key light. We can play with the alpha bias, which is controlling the Despill bias. And sort of play around with it. And then play around with the screen color as well. So we can get like a slightly darker value. So something like this is pretty good. So we went from this to this with the key light. Again, you're gonna really need to play around with it to get a feel of how it works. It's kind of finicky, but yeah. So we'll blur this alpha. That's doing a decent job in terms of that area. So you see, obviously we don't want it there because it's messing up that area. So we're gonna need to like have a little bit of a tighter roto there maybe. In terms of that, we can put it. So maybe we'll do a little bit less of a blur on this one to keep it. So you might need to do a little bit of a tighter roto to keep that thing sort of only around the area we're intending, and maybe fade it off because you don't want it to start to contaminate other things. And it's a little bright as well. So I'm gonna do an edge alpha. So I'll teach you guys how to make an edge alpha based off of our existing alpha. So I'm gonna break this up. So I have this key mix here that's using our roto shape, but I want to create an edge alpha so I can just darken this edge because it's kind of a little bit too bright. And so we can either use a despill matte and then try to create an edge matte, or we can use our existing alpha that we've already created. So either way, it's fine. It's just a black and white image we're using to control that edge. So let's just use the existing alpha in this case. So how we can create an edge matte, an edge alpha, is we take our original alpha and basically we do an erode. And we look at the alpha and we shrink it in very slightly. So we shrink it in just a little bit. And then we'll subtract that from the original alpha. So A minus B. Actually, we'll do a stencil. That works better. And so that's what's happening. So we're shrinking an alpha in and we're stenciling it out from the original. So now we're just getting just the edge. So that's how you can get kind of an edge matte. So the more we shrink it in, the bigger we are selecting of the edge. So we can do that. We can also put another erode on the other side. And then using that erode, we can control the outside of the edge. So now we can control how far out we control, or this one will control how far in. So that's what gives us a really, really in detail kind of level of control. Also, all this grainy stuff, we can fix it by putting a gray beforehand, switching it to RGBA, and then just slightly pushing down the black point. So we're getting rid of some of the gray stuff. So we're just getting that edge. And I'm gonna push it even further because we really just want the rope. So I'm gonna push the black point really far so we get this rope there. And okay, so that's good. It's a little bit sharp, but it's good for now. And I'm just gonna move this down a little bit. I'm going to bring this little edge matte over across our thing. I don't like crossing stuff like this very often, but in this case, it'll be useful. So now we'll plug a grade in, and we'll just plug it into our despill. And I'm going to start to darken using that alpha. So you see it's really, it's a harsh edge right now, but it's easy to see what we're doing. So we can control how much of the edge we want to darken. So I'm going to take this erode, the inner erode, and just kind of put it just on the edge. And then I'm going to put a blur on it. So I can kind of get a blurred effect. And the harsh edge on the outside doesn't matter because that's going to be disappeared anyway in the alpha. But we could blur it as well just in case we don't want to worry about it. So we've intentionally created a dark edge. That's probably too dark, so let's just make it slightly less. Oops. Yeah, so we'll just like do a slight darkening like that. And now if we look at the end result, okay, so that's too dark, it looks like. So let's just do a very slight darkening, something like that. And I'm going to expand that a little bit down just so we can capture this little bit of the edge there. And I think that's looking pretty good. We could go crazy with it and, you know, darken this edge and everything, but this would depend on now what production you're working on. Like something like this would probably pass QC on a television or episodic, like quality control. That's what QC means. So somebody will go through and check your shot. If this is a feature film, they probably will go in here and say, hey, can we just darken that edge a little bit? Or hey, can we darken this edge a little bit? And it's that picky. Basically, they put a grid over your entire shot, and they're going to zoom way in on edges and make sure you have like a really, really high level of detail. But it's not useful if you're just working on something where it's not going to be viewed on like a movie theater screen, for example. So we could go further with this, but I'm not going to. But I think you guys understand how if you've watched up to this point. So you guys could take it to the next level and really go in here and, okay, I want to just slightly darken this edge and etc. And one other thing I'm going to do is apply, we could slightly brighten this edge as well if you want to be really, really picky. But I'm going to put these match moves on here because these are supposed to stick. So I just forgot to do that. And okay, cool. So now we want to do some other stuff here. We can brighten this edge. So that's kind of easy. We can just create, we just really need an edge mat for that thing. Or we can create a new D-spell for it. So either way works. We could try to, probably a D-spell would work easier because it's mathematically kind of replacing a color versus like trying to create an edge and trying to fade it the exact way that that edge is faded. So I'm going to do it that way. So I'm going to use a D-spell Madness, I think. And plug it in. And then switch it. I'll put Restore Luminance on. So it kind of keeps the brightness. And I'll just darken it. You know what we could do? We could almost mix two of these because it looks like it does a good job. But I can't really darken that much with this unless I create a D-spell mat. Because when I try to darken this, it doesn't really do anything, unfortunately. But we definitely could mix two of these together. So I could take two of these, and I could take one and make it not restore the brightness, and then just do a dissolve. So I could dissolve these two. And then I could just get the level of brightness that's like exactly the same as the edge. And let me just put a dot here. And I'm going to move this down here. And we'll key mix that result around that area. And hopefully. And then we'll just put a roto shape, set it to no clip, and roto it on that edge. And that will probably fix it. We'll see. All right, that's doing a pretty good job. So if you compare, it's doing a pretty good job. Looks like we're brightening. I'm not sure if we're brightening our... Yeah, we are affecting the color of this. It looks like this thing is getting a little bit of D-spell because this has a bit of green in it. So these two D-spells are acting differently on this radar. So we might need to protect the color of it. So if you see what's happening, like it's a little bit darker here. And when we're adding it, it's not just fixing the edge, it's kind of brightening the whole thing. We could use the alpha to cut away from it, or we could just fade this as well. And just it might not be super noticeable either. Let's just try that first. Because actually, I think it looks pretty good in that level of brightness anyway. So we'll just try that and then see what that looks like. And So that's the difference. It's fixing our edge. It is brightening it very slightly. So we could, let's see. Let's just try to mix it a little bit back and then see what the result looks like. Yeah, so it's fixing the edge, but then we're creating like a brightness problem. So what do we want to do here? What's the quickest way to do this? Let's think about it. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the original alpha, which is this thing, and I'm going to sort of stencil it from this despill so that all this color correction will only be applied sort of to the edge. So let's try it. So A, stencil. So we have our alpha, which is stored over to the left, and we can stencil it from our key mix stencil. And then I can erode that result. So I have the original alpha. I'm eroding it down a little bit like this. I'm stenciling it out from the blend of this color correction. So you see the difference. And that's the result. So let's see. It still might need to be darkened very slightly, so we might still have to create another edge mat to just control this a little bit better. One other thing to note, let's just do another edge mat. So I'm going to copy this whole little setup I did, where I did 2 erodes and a stencil. I'm going to paste that here. And we'll see what kind of edge mat it gives us. It already kind of lines up with what we're doing, so it works sort of well. But I'm going to grade it beforehand just to get rid of some of the noise. So I'm going to do a white and black clamp and then just adjust to get really the area we need. It just helps. These edge mats are easier to create when there's not like gray stuff, basically. So if you make like a sharper alpha and then you create this edge mat, it just gives you a cleaner edge mat. And then I'll use that to darken just this area a little bit. And then I'm going to mask it again by the same roto that we're using here. So this is starting to get a little bit more complicated, as you can see. Hopefully you guys are following along. But just trying to go through. This is how a real key works. So a lot of times you're doing stuff like this. And I don't want to simplify it too much to make it not realistic, this class. So this is kind of a realistic scenario where you're going back and forth, trying to target a little edge just to try to get the quality that you're expected of if you're doing a really high quality show. And I think this is working pretty well. I can go back to our dissolve and just sort of nudge it a little bit, because if we go too far, it gives us that dark edge again. So that's one way to get rid of a dark edge. So that's how we've done it. We've done all that work just to get rid of a dark edge. There's other ways you can do this. For example, one way would be, this is sort of a trick. We can try it. Let's just try it. So I'm going to disable all that just to show you guys a separate way. So if we see this dark edge sort of effect here, sometimes you can go and put a grade before your pre-multiply, and you switch the grade to an alpha. And this is going to affect the whole alpha, so you got to be really careful because we're going to need to isolate it. But if you gamma up the alpha, gamma down the alpha, you see it actually will get rid of, it sort of kind of gets rid of the alpha edge and kind of fades it in. So sometimes you can get rid of dark edges by doing that. But you are kind of affecting the transparency of the image. So that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes if you place a grade after the alpha as well, you can also do this effect, but now it won't get rid of the edge. So this is, it's not proper necessarily to grade an alpha after despill. It's kind of a hack, but it definitely can save you time. So like instead of all that process we just did trying to despill it, I can just go there and just slightly brighten it like that. And it kind of looks like it works. And so that's just a hack. If you ever have like a bright edge or a dark edge that's just slightly off, we can just go there with alpha, gamma up the edge. And then obviously we would just put a roto shape with no clip, and then we would just target that edge like this. And it sort of works. And in this case, it might even be better than all that work that we did up top with this specific technique. So we can see that versus this one. So a slightly different result. I would say, let's just compare again. There's that, and then there's this. I would say I'd probably still go with the little bit longer result, or even combine the two, maybe. You could just get like the best of both. But yeah, I think I'll just go with the one I did. But that one, you see how much quicker it was, and it gave us like almost identical result. That would probably still work, honestly. This is just getting, you know, super high level of detail that we're talking about here. But last thing, we'll just put the track on there as well. So hopefully I didn't make that too long. I'll do another video just to kind of clean this up a little bit, the last despill, and we'll just try to fix up some of these weird kind of green edges and some of the little green areas that are appearing through on the bottom. And I can also go through another advanced technique that works pretty well for keying sometimes. We didn't use it in this case. So we still see there's some areas that could be darker a little bit, but to keep this tutorial a reasonable amount of time, I think you guys understand the concept at this point. So you guys can perfect it, and it's good practice to do so. But we'll go on to the next part.